My goodness, will you listen to that? Hello everybody! If you're wondering what that noise was at the very beginning of the podcast, that's going to be on there every single episode, and it's the sound of Tom putting in one of his old porno VHS tapes. That's why it sounds so fuzzy. You've been watching it a lot, haven't you, mate?
Virtually worn away.
Yeah, let's have a quick scan of the label there. Oh, Gaping Anuses Volume 4.
Not as good as 3, but an improvement on 2.
Well, I can't believe they made 3 previous volumes. I mean, that's quite extraordinary.
Still some story to tell.
Don't ever tell it on this show, please. I don't want to know.
Okay.
Yes, so, welcome to the very first episode of the Strange and Deadly Show. I'm not strange and he's not deadly, but we are two men. I'm from London, he's from Liverpool. My name is Chris, his name is Tom. You may know us from some of our previous work. We, in fact, used to be quite active as podcasters prior to doing this show. I'm going to hand this over to Tom for a moment to explain who he is and where he came from and what he was doing prior to the Strange and Deadly Show.
Some people might know me from my old podcast, The Gentleman's Grindhouse. That's where I first cut my teeth in the podcasting game. It was a horror podcast with my old friend Matt Dre. Done that for a while. Started writing for Scream magazine, which I still do. Speaking to a few celebrities and so on, so that's good fun. And then I did the Twilight Zone podcast, which was obviously a show about the Twilight Zone, one of my favourite TV shows. But that all got a bit much, so I stopped, and here I am with you. Yes,
and I must say, by the way, that I absolutely loved your work on the Gentleman's Grindhouse and some of what I listened to on the Twilight Zone podcast. I'm not actually au fait with the Twilight Zone, so it wasn't, it was more difficult for me to be able to absorb it because I hadn't seen the episodes you were talking about. But you were a great loss to that, I feel.
Thank you.
Yes, as for me, well, I haven't been podcasting now for about 5 or 6 years, but you may know me as the Goreboy. I used to do a show called Goreboy Radio many, many moons ago. Like I said, about 5 or 6 years ago. I mean, it's been a while. It was a solo show. I used to talk about horror movies on there. Really any kind of horror movie, old classics, modern films. Used to talk about the video nasties on there, in fact. All sorts of different things, and it was quite fizzy and energetic, and basically, it was just me talking a load of bollocks in a room by myself. And I'm sure Tom can attest to that, because he heard a lot of that bollocks.
I did hear a lot of that bollocks. It was a good show. It was the best at the time, I think. There was nothing really like it. But it does kind of make us the podcasting equivalent of The Odd Couple, because we are completely different in terms of podcasting style. So we'll see how this goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You're like a harbinger of doom, mate. Bloody hell. It's going to be fine. Good God. No, but seriously, I mean, we are quite different from each other. If you listen to our old shows, I mean, unfortunately, the Goreboy stuff's not available anymore. It got lost in the ether many years ago. But if you heard what we did separately, completely different from each other. But I like to think that what really brings us together as friends, and I'll explain in a minute how we actually met, what brings us together as friends is the fact that we like a lot of the same movies, don't we?
Well, that's right. And I remember when you came on the Gentleman's Grindhouse back in the day, we talked about a movie that you chose, which is one of my favourites as well, Maniac. And I think that kind of sums up where we meet. You know, we kind of meet in that dingy, grimy... I'm not meaning in our personal lives. I mean in our movie watching lives. Those sort
Speak for yourself.
Yeah, those grimy places, if you like. So that's what we've got in common.
Yeah, I mean, I like to think of it as, many, many years ago. I guess in the 70s and in the 80s, there were these old cinemas in the UK. I don't think they exist anymore, where you could go in and you could pay money if you were a scummy, grungy-looking man, and you could sit there and whack Mr. Happy out and look at a porn film, and there were just a bunch of guys in there. I'm not speaking from experience, I've read about it in a book, where they would just sit there wanking. And I like to think that Tom and I, that's what we are. We're not actually wanking, but I like to think of us mentally as that. Really, it's a terrible example, isn't it?
Where are you going with this?
I don't know. I don't. Where's anybody going in life, Tom?
Okay, so I've progressed from the Gentleman's Grindhouse, which was sort of like a grindhouse sort of gentleman's club for horror fans, to wanking in a cinema with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. I'm glad to say I've come up in the world anyway.
You have. No, you've gone straight down, mate. And you knew that was going to happen when you called on me to be a co-host on this thing. But as far as how Tom and I met, I always laugh at it because it's an interesting... It's not that interesting, but it's interesting to me, the way that it happened. I was doing the Goreboy show. I was rolling along with that. And Tom followed me on Twitter, and I followed him back. What had happened, I'd done an interview with Eileen Daly, who was a British horror actress. And she very kindly wrote... And she was writing an article in... Was it Dark Side magazine?
Dark Side magazine, yeah.
Yeah, so it was Dark Side magazine. And she wrote a little thing in there about me and my show, because we'd done an interview. And I didn't know that had happened. I was subbed to Dark Side for a little while, and I ended up cancelling it for monetary reasons. And Tom very kindly sent me a scan of the article, and I was blown away by it. I don't actually know if the article ever brought me any more listeners. I actually don't know. I don't remember getting like a huge influx of listeners afterwards. But the show did decently, but it was never like super listened to or anything. But and so I decided that this is the part that makes me laugh. I thought, okay, I'm really grateful to Tom for that. It was a lovely thing for him to do. I decided, I know what I'll do. I'll send him a bunch of films in the post as a way of saying thank you. And so I put together, I can't remember what they were. One of them was The Signal on Blu-ray.
That's right.
There were a couple of other things, exploitation films. I think there was a horror movie in there. And so I sent these off to Tom, and Tom was probably thinking, wow, I mean, this is pretty impressive. All I did was send him a scan of an article. And what he didn't know at the time, of course, is that I was just foisting a load of rubbish horror movies over to you because I'm
sending me your shit, weren't you?
Basically, yeah. I had a bunch of stuff for competitions in a drawer, and I'm like, I've got to get rid of this shit. Here's this guy, Tom Elliot. Let's whack these over to him in the post. So I'm sorry about that, mate.
It's all right. I'll get round to watching them one day.
Do you know what? So will I. Yeah. So that's how Tom and I met, and then from there, we sort of were kind of bouncing back and forth, talking to each other and getting along. And then you told me you wanted to start a podcast, and you sent me the pilot for that, and I listened to it, and you started working with Matt, and that became the Gentleman's Grindhouse. So I sort of feel like I've been around since before your podcasting career.
That's right.
And then I stopped doing it for various different reasons, personal reasons, all sorts of things. People thought I was dead. Because I used to look on my website stats, and it used to say there, is Goreboy dead? Which is people searching on Google to see if I was alive or not.
Yeah, sorry about that. I just needed to know. You hadn't called me in so long. What was I expected to do?
Exactly. Unfortunately, I'm still here. But so yeah, and so I stopped doing it, and then Tom's, it's a weird thing to say career, isn't it? Because I think both of us jointly feel that it never really became a career for us.
No. I mean, what kind of career can it be? It always ends up costing you money, costing you time. I think people think podcasting's a bit of a lark, but it's actually quite hard work to keep it going, isn't it?
It's quite a time investment, isn't it? But so I'm sort of hesitant to call it a career as such, but certainly his investment in podcasting, I mean, it sort of blossomed from there. Where I stopped, he carried on. He did a lot of episodes of the Gentleman's Grindhouse with Matt, and then you sort of moved on. You transitioned over to the Twilight Zone podcast. So you've always stayed in podcasting, haven't you? And
yeah.
Over the years, we've always kept in contact with each other. We've known each other now for, I think, something approaching 6 years, maybe.
That's right.
And we have said many times, particularly I would say in the last 2 years, maybe one day we should do a show together. And then we would come up with an idea for the show, and somebody else would bloody do it.
Yeah, that happened a couple of times.
Yeah, why don't you tell them, tell the boys and girls out there about our Video Nasties idea and what happened to that?
We like those kind of movies, like we've said, the grimy sort of Grindhouse style of movies. So we thought, well, what's going to be the ideal thing for us to do then? And I think, I'm not quite sure whether the first definitive guide came out, the release, the documentary. I think that might have just come out, and maybe that just sparked something. I said, let's go through the Video Nasties, and you were like, yes, let's do it. And then another friend of ours, another podcasting friend, as we were chatting via email or something, said, yeah, I'm going to do a podcast about the video nasties. And that guy was Christopher Brown, a friend of both of ours. I didn't like to say to him at the time that he just killed our hopes of ever podcasting together.
No, I mean, he's a lovely man, but you, Chris, I know Chris will be listening to this. Chris, you're a thieving bastard. We were because we legitimately were quite excited about that idea, weren't we?
We were, and after that we were just empty. We didn't have anything, and we were like, and it stalled us for 2 years while he did the Video Nasties podcast, and we couldn't think of anything else to do.
I have to say, like, that idea, it seemed so solid to us that when we realised it wasn't going to be there anymore. I mean, all of a sudden I was coming up with all sorts of ideas. I don't know, maybe I should just record a show with me shitting into a bucket or something. It really did sort of leave us flummoxed for a while. And we came up with a few other ideas. We decided, okay, well, why don't we try and do something where we cover foreign horror movies only? So they could only be foreign. So because we're great fans of, I mean, we can get into this show's going to be a little bit longer than the rest of our shows, but we're just sort of introducing ourselves to you all. But, you know, and we'll get into talking about the horror movies that we love and the genres and things like that. But we're big fans of Italian horror movies, for example.
That's right.
And so we thought, well, maybe we should do that. And maybe we still will in the years to come. We don't know. We've got a mission that we're going to tell you about first. Maybe that will still happen or something similar to it. But so we had that idea, but nothing really seemed concrete until Tom presented another idea to me quite recently, actually. And we're going to, we'll tell you about that in a minute, what the idea actually was. And it still has something to do with the video nasties, but it has its own unique twist, doesn't it?
With podcasting, you've got to do something that you really love. And, you know, we did go through a lot of things that maybe I would like more than you or you would like more than me. And we were maybe struggling to find that real one key thing, because that's why when we hit on this one, it felt like, right, this is the right one for us.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're Ricky Gervais or someone like that, and who is popular outside of the podcast that he does, but is also incredibly popular as part of it. I mean, it's quite difficult to make a career out of podcasting. Listen, guys, we're not doing this for the money, because we're not getting any money for doing it. You've got to do it for the passion for it, And after watching one of the movies that we're going to be discussing today, I'm not sure I've got the passion for it. I think this is going to be my first and last episode, but we'll get to that later. Why don't you, Tom, maybe talk about how you grew up as a horror fan, what kind of movies got you into horror, what kind of horror movies you like? Why don't we start there, and then I can follow you. I'm
38 years old now, so I still remember the video shops. They were very much the kind of... That was your mecca, wasn't it? You go there and you browse the movies and you pick something. Now, in those days, there may have been magazines and so on about movies, but I was too young to read them. I just went to video shops. So that was the days when you just picked stuff at random. You would just look at the cover, and whatever was on the cover would be your kind of, okay, I like that. And that's why you had all these great sort of lurid covers, and that's why... These days, it's just, I will just throw something together on Photoshop. They already know what's coming. We've hyped them up enough for it. So, For me, I was very much a child of the 80s, and the Friday the 13th, the Nightmare on Elm Street, they were my horror movies. They were the ones that I gravitated to, and I had parents who were quite happy to get them out of the video shop for me, and so I went through them all, the Halloweens and so on. There was probably... at that time, some of the movies that we'll be talking about, I don't know, that probably went over my head, that maybe my parents picked up that box and said, what the, Cannibal World? No, not. Let's leave that one. Let's go for Friday the 13th Part 5 instead, So that probably happened. But it was then when I got a bit older that, we've seen this great boom of Italian stuff making a resurgence lately in England. It just really kind of struck something with me. So I've become a great fan of that. We've got great companies like Arrow Video, Shameless. There's a couple of companies stateside doing great work. So I'm a fan of all that kind of stuff, Not so much vintage horror, but, if it's on of an afternoon, I'll sit and watch it. But yeah, very much a child of the horror franchises of the 80s and so on.
Yeah. Now, when you say vintage horror, you generally mean sort of... I mean, I know that your tastes much like mine really, kind of range from the 60s onwards, I would say. So when you say vintage horror, you're kind of referring more to the 30s and 40s stuff, aren't you?
Yeah, and I suppose you could put Hammer in on that. I mean, I appreciate them, and sometimes I will watch them, but it's not really where my passion lies.
I, on the other hand, am 31, which means I'm not as old as Tom, which you can probably hear in our voices. Youthful energy there, old haggard man over there.
That's right.
Well, it's going to be like this, folks. There's going to be banter, but you need to know that I care for this man deeply. Well, a bit, anyway. Yes, so I'm 31 years old. Much like Tom, I grew up browsing the video shops. It's a great point that you made about the covers of DVDs and Blu-ray releases these days. It's basically all just put together on Photoshop, and there's no real artistry to it, you know. Whereas when we were kids, there's not a huge difference between us really, about 9 years. Is it 9 years? No, it's 8 years.
8 years.
Sorry,
well,
I'm
7.
Terrible. Yeah, about 7. Yeah. So when we were kids, you would look at the artwork on the video, and that would be enough to sell the movie to you. You know, nowadays you've got trailers. I mean, there were trailers even then, of course, but nowadays we've got trailers so readily accessible to us. We can go on YouTube now, and we can see a trailer, and half the trailers I see give away the entire movie. Anyway, you know, all the plot points. I remember I saw a trailer for the remake of Last House on the Left, and the trailer it literally gave away every plot point in the movie. But we didn't have that back then, so you relied on maybe the title of the movie and also the artwork for the movie. So I definitely can identify with that. So it was really browsing video shops where it really started for me, and I've told this story so many times, but none of my old podcasts exist anymore, so hopefully this will be a story that's new to people. My parents would let me watch a horror movie now and again. You know, they didn't mind doing that. But what they would do is they would have me sat in there as a young child, and let's say that Halloween came on. They would let me watch Halloween. But when something bad was happening in the movie, they would put a cushion over my face. They weren't trying to suffocate me, I think. They would put a cushion over my face so that I couldn't see what was happening. Now, the problem with doing that, of course, is that even though you can't see it, you can hear it. So, and the imagination of a child is there's nothing you could show me that's worse than the imagination of a child. So of course I would make up things in my head. They did the same thing with Nightmare on Elm Street. And the way that I actually got into horror movies was because I was afraid of them. Yeah. It's the truth of the matter. You know, I remember I was deathly afraid of Freddy Krueger. I really was. You know, it didn't help that my dad would stand in the kitchen doorway in the shadows, like moving his hand around as if he had finger knives on, you know. Terrible memories. So I remember taping off of TV the first 2 Nightmare on Elm Street movies, and they helped me to get over it. And from there, it sort of blossomed into a great love of horror movies. I grew up with the Friday the 13th series, like Tom did. And in fact, Halloween is my favourite horror movie. The John Carpenter original, always has been. Ever since I was a kid, I was mesmerised by it. So loved the Friday the 13th series, the Halloween franchise, and then that continued blossoming into a love of Italian movies. I can't quite remember what it was that got me into them. It may have been Zombie Flesh Eaters, Zombie 2, or Zombie in America, as it's known. And that started a love of Lucio Fulci, which I know you have a great love of the man as well, Tom.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so, and then, Dario Argento and so on and so forth. So it's been a love that has built up over the years, of sort of slowly descending into more and more of the madness of horror movies, not just the big franchise stuff, but also the obscure stuff, Italian, Spanish movies, Euro horror. Unlike Tom, I'm actually quite a big fan of the Hammer movies. I like, as he described it, vintage stuff. It's not a problem for me, but I can understand also Tom likes something that's very gruey and grimy and everything, and so do I. But that's sort of where he begins. The tastes are very, very similar. We kind of grew up in a similar way.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I come from as a horror movie fan. And hey, 31 years doing it. Been a fan since I was probably about 8 or 9 years old. Don't see any signs of slowing down anytime soon. I don't know about you, mate.
No, I don't think so. It at times I might move on to other things for a while, and then come back to it. You've got to freshen yourself up every now and again, and keep that love alive. I don't live and breathe it 24/7, but sometimes I do, and then other times I'll leave it. But I always come back to it. That's the thing, and that's what keeps me going. And I think when people hear about what we're both into, they'll probably think, well, are you going to podcast about those franchises of the 80s then? But I mean, I guess it's a good time to say what we actually will be doing, right?
Yeah, I mean, and also, I mean, that kind of thing. Talking about the Romero trilogy, well, it's not a trilogy anymore, but you know what I mean, the classic trilogy of Night, Dawn, and Day. I mean, those kind of things, they're great movies to talk about. I love that trilogy to death. We've discussed Friday the 13th, all these big franchises, but I kind of feel like that's been done to death,
Well, that's it. I mean, we did horror podcasting 5 or 6 years ago now, and at that time there was actually podcasts that had been doing it for a few years at that point. So horror podcasts are 10 a penny, and I'm not saying we're coming to this with any great originality. There's always going to be someone who's doing something similar, that sort of thing. But I think that's why it comes back to you've got to please yourself as to what you're doing. But also, like we say, I love those franchises, and I love listening to podcasts about those franchises, but it's been done. What's left to say, Which I think is why what we're doing now, it's a little bit different, in a sense. It's not reinventing the wheel, but it's maybe a little bit off the beaten track. Basically, what we decided to do was that second documentary came out, Video Nasties, The Definitive Guide 2. Whereas the first documentary had special features, which was trailers for all the Video Nasties, what the Definitive Guide 2 had was trailers for what they call Section 3 films, which was films that were on Section 3 of the DPP, Obscene Publications Act. So I'll read off Chris Brown's website, seeing as he stole our idea.
Yes, that's it. Get that trending on Twitter. Chris Brown stole our idea.
But what he says is the DPP Section 3 list is a list of 80 films, it's actually 82, that it was believed could get a conviction under the lesser Section 3 of the Obscene Publication Act. This would mean the confiscation and destroying of videotapes ordered by magistrate. And these were films that were not considered to be capable of getting a conviction at the High Court, but had got guilty pleas at magistrate's court. And he then goes on to say that there is confusion with films on this list. People might sometimes assume they are video nasties because you've got things like Texas Chainsaw Massacre on the list. So I came to you with this. We talked about it. I think we were both of the same mind that what I like about this list is it does have a lot of obscurities on it, but it's not all horror movies. You've got cult movies on there like Foxy Brown. There are actually some less obscure horror movies like Friday the 13th Part 1 and 2, Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead. So we run that gamut from, obscurities to cult to a couple of well-known ones and well-loved ones, which it's not too bad throwing that in every now and again. No. So I think we've got a good cross-section there of films that we can have a look at, and it is a little bit different. Like I say, I don't think we're reinventing the wheel, but it's maybe a slightly different approach.
Well, talk about yourself, mate. I'm going places. I'm going to be somebody someday, Tom. But no, seriously, what we're doing is, I mean, that just to explain it, the list of films there that's on that list, the Section 3 films, for the time being, that's going to be our mission, is to get through those movies. Now, we've said to each other, and we don't know when it's going to be, assuming that we enjoy doing the show together and we can actually finish that list. Once it's done, that doesn't mean it's going to be the end of the show. It might mean that we can then transition into covering other horror movies, maybe changing it more into the idea that we had before Tom presented the Section 3 idea. But that is our mission at the moment, is that list of films there. I think also what helps to give it more of a unique spin is that it's going to be a double bill every episode, and for the time being at least, there's going to be a specific theme. We're pairing together two movies. For example, in this episode we have two cannibal movies. In the next episode, we might have something else and something else and something else, until basically we can't make any more matches. In which case, it will just throw two movies together. But so for a while at least, we'll have a specific theme. I really like that idea. It's again, like Tom said, we're not reinventing anything. But at the end of the day, we just kind of want to talk about movies, I think. Yeah, and just discuss things, discuss good things, bad things, anything in between. I really feel like discussing things, discussing movies with each other, having fun doing it, even if we didn't like the movie. Even if we did like the movie, is even better. Ultimately, that's the goal of the show.
We have kept in touch over the years, and we always end up talking about these kinds of things anyway. So, but there are those stretches where we might lose touch for a while, then we'll get back in touch. So it's a good way of us sort of using those conversations in a slightly creative way, and hoping other people enjoy it, because I love podcasts, I listen to them all the time, and I like that other people kind of connect with us and enjoy what we've done in the past as well, and hopefully they'll get something out of this one as well.
Absolutely. Now, there was a name we brought up a couple of times during this conversation that we've had so far. He's an idea thief. His name is Chris Brown.
Yep.
And I think it would be remiss of us not to mention his podcast, which is the Video Nasties Podcast. You can hear it at videonastiespodcast.com. All right, Chris? So you can stop threatening my family now. I've given you that. I would like to, first of all, he's done a very good job with the show. He's really made it his mission. I'm not sure how long he's been doing it now. Is it since last year?
I think it's a couple of years now. He did the Night Gallery before that. He's a bit of a man on a mission, like you say, when he does podcasts, and when he puts his mind to something, he sticks to it, and he gets it done.
Yes, absolutely. When he puts his mind to stealing other people's ideas, he's the best at it, I think.
He is.
He absolutely is. He's a lovely man, Chris Brown. And yet, like I was saying, he's made it his mission, as you say, over the past couple of years, to cover every single film on the Video Nasties list, not the Section 3 list.
No.
So he's got his podcast there. He's also recently released a book, which is called The Video Nasties Moment, examining the films behind the scare. Now, he's given me a free review copy of that. So I do feel that I have to at least mention that and thank him for that, because it was very kind of him to do that. I kind of cheekily said, oh, hey, mate, can I have a free copy of that maybe, so that I can, have a look at it? And he very kindly sent it to me. Most people would have been like, no, fuck off, buy it yourself. But he didn't do that. So he's a nice man. If you want to read more information about the book, you can do so, videonastiespodcast.com/book. You can buy it there. He's got it in all sorts of available formats. There's digital formats on there. He's got it in a paperback form. So he really gives you a good service. I've not actually read the book yet, but while we were talking there, Tom, I was just scanning through the beginning of it, and there's an acknowledgement section there, and we're not in it. I'm angry. And quite frankly, Chris Brown, fuck your book. So that's what I have to say on that. Now.
Okay, I actually saw Chris the other night. We both went to a Goblin show in Manchester, and it was Goblin doing a live score to Suspiria, which is actually on the Section 3 list. So we will be coming to that eventually, along with Deep Red.
Lovely. One of my favourites.
Absolutely. So, and I saw Chris there. We had a drink, and I didn't ask for a free copy of the book. I said, I'm going to get the book. And he said, Tom, I'll send you a copy to make up for stealing your podcast idea. So I think we're even personally, but if you want to keep going on about it, that's up to you, mate.
Well, all I have to say, Tom, is have you checked for your wallet today? Is it missing? I bet it is. Chris Brown, thief. Anyway, I'm sorry, Chris. I'm sorry. All right. But no, he's a lovely man, and well done that man for quite frankly dedicating his life to the Video Nasties thing for a couple of years. Certainly, even though I feel that we probably would have done a much better job of it. He's come in and he's dedicated himself to it, and I have a lot of respect for him, a lot of respect. And we'll bring Chris up again later for a very specific reason, because we've got something to play you a little bit later on. So, That's it, folks. Hopefully we've rambled on enough now. I say we, probably me, really. I am. Yeah, Tom is. Whenever Tom speaks, I mean, first of all, you'll notice a difference between our voices. Tom is like a bronze god, deep-voiced, sort of like, I like to think of you as the white James Earl Jones.
Okay, I don't look like a white James Earl Jones, but I'll see where you're going.
Yeah, well, I mean more with the voice.
Okay.
You know. In fact, Tom looks a bit like a superhero. Like, do you know what you look like? Actually, you look a bit like the Punisher. So you listen to this man's voice. It's rich, it's soulful. And if you ever get to see a picture of Tom someday, you'll understand what I mean. He looks like the Punisher. He's a superhero. And then you look at a picture of me. First of all, you hear the voice, squeaky muppet.
Cockney Barra Boy.
And second of all, you look at a picture of me, which is available on my Twitter account, by the way. The most miserable picture of me that exists, by the way. Even though I wasn't miserable at the time, I was trying to make a cool face. Didn't work out. And I look like a vagina with a wig on. There's an imbalance here. I don't really know where I'm going with this, to be honest with you, Tom. I don't know why I brought this up.
I don't know, mate. Maybe we should talk about the films.
I think that's what we need to do. Now, we've got two movies, like we were talking about, the double bill theme. This week's theme, or this episode's theme rather, is Cannibals. And we have two movies here. Now, I would like to say Tom picked these two movies and paired them up. Tom also came up with the name of the show. So if you have any grievances about the name of the show, about the quality of the show, about the films that were picked, please direct all your feedback to ihatetom@tomsucks.com. Or feedback@strangeanddeadly.com if you want to. And if you've got anything nice to say, direct those my way. Thank you. Or direct that my way, rather. Cannibal Films, Tom?
I've got to admit, it's not really my favourite subgenre, but it seemed an obvious choice because the films we're going to be covering are Cannibal and Cannibals, so you can't really get, thematically much closer than that. But what about you? Are you a big fan of the Cannibal subgenre?
Not really. I have to be honest with you. I mean, of course, it would be remiss of us if we didn't talk about Cannibal Holocaust, which is probably the most infamous one. I think we've both seen it, a number of times, and I enjoy it for what it is. I have problems with it, and really I have problems with most of the Cannibal movies I've seen. I mean, I've seen a handful of them. I'm not going to pretend that I've got a huge palette of Cannibal movies, but there are a lot of them that were made. I'm not a huge fan of them, so for us to sort of begin with these two movies, we're really coming from a place where we're not. I think it's fair to say we're not super knowledgeable about the cannibal subgenre, if you like. But it is interesting also to watch something that you're not that familiar with.
A lot of this list is going to be a bit of a voyage of discovery. And when it comes to Cannibal Films, for me personally, Cannibal Holocaust does cast a long shadow. And I remember watching that when I was a teenager, just being totally disgusted and repulsed by it. And kind of thought, well, that's Cannibal movies, they can keep them. It was only when I was older and I watched it again that I do actually appreciate Cannibal Holocaust quite a bit. I would say I like the film now, but it is considered to be the ultimate cannibal movie. So where do you go from there? I also think that my tastes are very urban as well in a lot of ways. Things like New York Ripper, things like Maniac, the city where they are set is a kind of character in itself, and I love that, the 70s New York vibe. Or if you look at things like Deep Red or Suspiria, these Italian cities, and Argento would have these great sort of wide shots of the city, and I love that sort of thing. So I'm more about the kind of urban landscape in my horror movies, I think, and the jungle just never really interested me that much.
Couldn't agree more with you, to be honest. But I don't really know why the jungle doesn't appeal to me that much. Maybe it's because I don't want to be in it, or crash land in it, I think, is probably the reason why. But also, there is something about a horror movie that's set in an urban environment compared to something that's set in the sort of leafy greens and caves. It's not something that really appeals to me that much, I have to be honest. That said, you were talking about Cannibal Holocaust there and how you've come to appreciate it. I have too. And it's a life-changing movie, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's quite difficult to forget some of the things you've seen. It can be pretty. Maybe it comes across as. I don't think it comes across as tame now. I think it's still fairly hardcore even now. Yeah, but I can certainly understand the appeal of cannibal movies, but I would side with you in that I think generally we prefer a very different kind of horror movie.
It's a harsh environment, the jungle. It's an environment where if we went there, we'd probably last about 5 minutes. Whereas we can put ourselves in a city, even, backwoods kind of American horror movies. I like those, Texas Chainsaw, that sort of thing. For some reason, I can still identify with that because it's just slightly off the beaten track. Whereas I couldn't ever find myself in the jungle.
Now, we have 2 movies today. Let's waste no more time. In the case of one of them, I had to sit through it. I need to purge it from my system, Tom, and I think you know what one I'm talking about.
I think I do.
But let's begin with Cannibal, 1977. Again, directed by Ruggero Deodato. Written by Tito Carpi, Gianfranco Clerici, Renzo Genta, and Giorgio Carlo Rossi. Now, the film's also known as Jungle Holocaust, The Last Survivor, Last Cannibal World, and Ultimo Mondo Cannibale, Butchos Gali, Chris Watt. There are other titles for the film as well. I think there are about 20 of them, so that's as much as you're going to get. I've got a plot summary here that I'm going to read to you, and then I'm going to hand it over to Tom to get his initial opinion on the film. So here's the plot of the movie. A group of oil prospectors land roughly on the island Mindanao, and they briefly put their plane out of commission. The group is comprised of oil prospector Robert, played by Massimo Foschi, the jungle savvy Rolf, played by Ivan Razimov, knowledgeable pilot Charlie, played by Sheikh Razak Shakur, and a girl named Swan, who I presume is a translator, but her role is never made clear, and she's out of the movie pretty quickly anyway. I don't think we actually established, did we, Tom, who she was, or what she was doing in the movie, or what her name was?
No, none of that.
They've landed in Mindanao because there's a base camp there with a group of other prospectors who Robert plans to meet. However, Robert and Rolf very quickly discover, after Robert goes off running like a madman in search of others, that the people from the base camp have been killed and cannibalized, with only their remains left scattered among the trees and bushes of the jungle. Who said I couldn't be a writer, eh? That's right. Robert and Rolf return to the plane, to be told by Charlie that it has now been repaired, but they'll be unable to set off until the next morning as it's getting dark outside. So they hole up inside the plane, and Rolf tells Robert that there is a tribe living on the island who also happen to be some of the last cannibals in the world, some of the last known cannibals in the world. Swan, the girl, decides to step outside the plane for a quick pee, but she's kidnapped by tribesmen waiting for her. Robert, Rolf and Charlie hear her screams, and Charlie wants to help, but Robert and Rolf convince him to wait until the morning. They'll all go and look for her then. Morning arrives, and out they venture into the dangerous jungle. Charlie meets a grisly end not too long after, which is a shame because I like that character, having a spiked ball trap flung his way with jutting pieces of wood that impale him where he stands. So Robert and Rolf, panicked, attempt to journey on. To their horror, they discover a small campsite littered with tribesmen and women feasting on fresh meat from a recently killed human, probably Swan. So, fearing for their lives, the 2 remaining men scatter towards a river. Once there, they proceed to build a raft and row until the current becomes too rapid and too wild. They hit a rock, tumble off into the water. Rolf disappears along with the raft, leaving Robert as the only remaining member of the group. He attempts to survive on his own, I guess for about a day, but he eats a mushroom which turns out to be poisonous. So after suffering all night from stomach aches and nausea, he awakes to find himself surrounded by a group of cannibals who corral him back to their own camp, and they proceed to poke, prod him, torture him, pull his knob. Terrible. They keep him prisoner there, and while as a captive he meets a native woman who is kinder to him than the others, played by Mimi Lay. He eventually makes an escape with a woman alongside him and bumps into Rolf, again inside a cave, and the 3 of them spend the remainder of the movie trying to survive and find their way back to the plane while the cannibals are in pursuit.
We can't be sure of anything, Robert. But as far as we know, this jungle is inhabited by the Tajitos.
Tajitos? But, didn't I read Stone Age.
And they're also cannibals.
Shh. Keep your voice down. They don't know anything about this.
Yes, cannibals. The last cannibals left in the world. Along with some on the Amazon and in New Guinea.
Stop. No more of that. What are you trying to do, for Christ's sakes? Give me the shakes.
So that's my plot summary. Before we discuss the movie and give our opinions on it, I'll just give you a little bit of background here on Ruggero Deodato. He's an Italian director born in 1939 who became one of the most notorious horror exploitation filmmakers, thanks largely to his controversial video nasty Cannibal Holocaust, which we discussed. Which is perhaps the most infamous cannibal movie ever made. The movie was an enormous success internationally, but its infamy eclipsed anything he would do afterwards. This film, Cannibal, or Last Cannibal World, as it was named on the print Tom and I watched, was Deodato's first foray into the cannibal genre, and it was made 3 years before Holocaust. This is considered to be the first in Deodato's Cannibal trilogy, which also includes Cannibal Holocaust and Cut and Run, the latter of which I've not seen. Have you seen that one, Tom?
I haven't, no.
So, given the plot summary, giving you a little bit of background on Deodato, Tom, what do you think of this movie?
It's hard to escape the shadow of Cannibal Holocaust, I think. And when I first started to watch it, I was just comparing everything to Cannibal Holocaust, you know. I couldn't help myself. Because quite early on as well, you can see Deodato he puts up that card at the beginning that it was a true story. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming that was a load of rubbish, you know, and he's just doing that to kind of play with the audience, which he would do to probably greater effect with Cannibal Holocaust, or the lengths he went to with that movie to try and convince people that it was actually real and so on, and all the fallout after that. So you can see him sort of starting to play with those things. And if we take this opening act, you know, it's quite different, more sympathetic characters than that Cannibal Holocaust and so on. I kind of like where he's going with it. He puts these people in the jungle, and it doesn't take long for things to just go horribly wrong. And for whatever reason, some of them quite bizarre, they end up running around in the jungle, and it's got quite a claustrophobic feel about it, whereas I found Cannibal Holocaust quite expansive in its sort of scope. It's like wherever they turn, something reminds them that they're just out of their depth, you know. There's like, I think there was a snake fighting a lizard or something like that, and you know, even at one point when he finds something to eat, he ends up throwing up, you know, that kind of thing. So, you know, it establishes quite quickly that they're really screwed.
Yeah, I mean, it's one man against the elements, isn't it? And against, in a very foreign place. You said sympathetic characters there. The only, oddly I suppose, the only character that I didn't find particularly sympathetic was the lead character, Robert. I found him to be, I mean, certainly compared to Cannibal Holocaust, because there's a message in Cannibal Holocaust, which is that these people who have journeyed there and are exploiting the tribe are worse than the tribe. They're worse than the cannibals. So in that respect, certainly more sympathetic. But I found Robert to be difficult to get to grips with. But the rest of the characters, certainly, I mean, the girl in there, Swan, we assume that's her name. It really has no more than 2 lines, I think. So it really isn't in the movie. I quite liked Charlie, the affable pilot, and I quite liked Rolf as well. You know, the sort of the smart guy who knows his way around the jungle. Knows a few bits of information that might be able to help them. I do think it's quite funny that they land on the ground roughly and they end up breaking off a wheel, I think, and that's why they can't take off immediately. And for some reason, Robert just goes running off into the jungle like a madman. Like, I don't really particularly understand why he did that.
There's a lot of things, I think, in this opening that people do, and I understand that they're in this unforgiving place and so on. But later on, when Swan gets out of the plane because she wants to go to the toilet, and then she starts screaming, and not one of them gets out to help her.
Yeah.
You know, I sat and I thought, well, obviously we don't know how well anyone knows each other. Are they there just to do this mission? Have they worked together for a long time? I don't know. There might be some dialogue there that I can't remember that clarifies that. But it's one of those things where she gets out the plane, and I kind of thought, well, you would get out of that plane to help. But there's a lot of things in that opening where they're just, it seems like they're just pushing themselves to get lost, to get in trouble, just for the sake of the film, putting them in peril that doesn't particularly feel natural to what people would really do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it baffled me when Swan goes outside and she's taken by the tribe. You never actually see her again, alive anyway, and they hear her screams. And Robert and Rolf, I mean, Charlie wants to get out and help her, but Robert and Rolf say, well, no, look, you can't do that. It's too dangerous outside or whatever. We'll look for her in the morning. Well, why would you ever do that when there's a chance you could leap out of the plane and possibly see her being taken and grab her there, then and there? It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So the opening part of it, I absolutely agree with you. It does feel a little bit to me like it's nonsensical how they attempt to get themselves more and more lost in the jungle when probably the safer thing to do would be to stay near the plane. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Because once they venture out in the morning, which they do, to go and find Swan, I mean, Charlie, who's, the most affable character, I mean, Charlie gets it quickly in the movie. He doesn't get to do much more than swing his machete a couple of times. Then this spiked ball, which is a trap that's been set up to kill somebody, it's flung his way and boom, it hits him and he is dead. And so you've got Robert and Rolf, rather than think, okay, this is dangerous, why don't we head back to the plane? They decide to venture deeper into the jungle and they end up getting themselves lost. So it's nonsensical, isn't it?
Absolutely. But I think what it does lead to is a sequence which I enjoyed, not only because it looked pretty good, but I kind of thought to myself, that must have been hell to film. And that's when they make that shitty little raft and they're going down those rapids. It's a good scene, and how they pulled it off in those days, I would love to hear Deodato's kind of commentary on that to see how they did, because it's pretty impressive for the time.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's remarkable that they managed to put together. I mean, you called it a shitty raft. To me, it looked like it was pretty bloody well constructed. I mean, it looked like they got, they had a bit of gaffer tape in their pocket or whatever, because it's put together pretty well. I have to say, I mean, we're going to talk about the details of the movie as we go along. I actually quite enjoyed this. I thought it was quite decent. Without trying to give away too much about the next movie we talk about, I do think Deodato is a much better filmmaker than Jess Franco.
Oh, absolutely.
Even though you could argue that Cannibal Holocaust is the more accomplished film, I do think there's something here. I think there's a bit of craftsmanship, I think.
Well, there is, and I think once we get this nonsensical kind of first act out the way, that's when it starts to come into its own, when Robert is in the caves with the cannibals and he gets captured. That's kind of where the movie starts for me.
Yeah, I agree with you. Maybe, we're not saying the opening is bad, I think, but it takes a little while to get into the meat of it. Like you were saying, they're on the raft, they're travelling up the river, the raft end up hitting a rock, Rolf disappears, the raft is gone, and there's a nice shot there, I think, of Robert kind of standing there and turning around and looking up into the trees, and I really got a feeling there, a sense of isolation for him. I thought this is a man who is now, for all intents and purposes, on his own, because at that point we think, well, Rolf is probably dead, Charlie's dead, Swan's gone. This man is on his own and he has to survive in the jungle, and there are cannibals out there, there's a tribe out there, and when are we going to get to see them? So Robert, he eats a mushroom, I think, which is a dangerous thing to do in the jungle when you don't know what the mushroom is, but at the same time the guy was starving hungry. He eats the mushroom, he ends up being sick, bad stomach aches, passes out on the ground, and when he wakes up there are all these members of the tribe standing around him, pointing at him with big sharp sticks. How do you feel about that scene? Because I actually thought that was quite an intimidating moment.
Just going back to the mushroom thing, it's like I said before, this guy's been through the ringer now, and he just has this one moment of relief where he gets some food in his stomach, he sees the mushrooms and eats it, but even that makes him sick. He just can't catch a break, and then he wakes up in that cave with all those cannibals there. And you're absolutely right, it is very intimidating. They're all there making these noises. You can't understand a word they're saying. It was bad enough and it just got worse.
When he's actually in the cave, he's been corralled into this cave by the tribe. There are a lot of them there. Again, I think that's very intimidating. I mean, you've got to imagine if you were in that scenario. These people, they are, according to the movie, they're a Stone Age tribe. They don't speak English. You can't communicate with anybody.
No.
It's just one man, one American man. I guess he's supposed to be an American man, isn't he? But or is he supposed to be an American man? I guess he isn't. Anyway, whoever the hell he is, he's a Western man inside this cave, and he doesn't know what's going to happen to him. And I initially thought there was going to be torture, but instead they're sort of a bit fascinated with him, aren't they? They're doing things to him that make him incredibly uncomfortable. They take all of his clothes off. At one point, the girl, played by Mimi Lay, who would later come to be kinder to him, takes his underpants off. He's wearing some fierce black lycra. It was the 70s after all, Tom. You've got people coming up to him, sort of pulling at his penis. Very uncomfortable moment. Because I was, I thought, right, there's going to be the old Willy Wonka is going to be cut off here, isn't it? That's what I was thinking.
Well, that's it. You've still got Cannibal Holocaust in your head, haven't you? So.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm thinking that must be what happens, but it doesn't. They've seen the plane, so they think that he can fly. So they hoist him up on a rope, a sort of pulley system. How do you feel about that scene, Tom? I thought that it really summed up this man's plight. Here he is in a big open cave with a bunch of people who are not going to let him get away. He's on his own. He can't communicate with anybody. I thought it was a very effective scene. He's
not only trapped in a cave with them, now they're going to make him jump off a cliff with a piece of twine tied to him. If it stops your fall, it's still going to hurt. And it just gets stranger from there. He gets put in that cage, and that bird with a massive beak. Considering what happens next, though, I'm surprised the bird doesn't get its face ripped off or something by one of the cannibals. But then we have this extended kind of scene where he's trapped in the cage, and he must have been there for a while because he starts to grow a beard. So I'm not quite sure how long he's supposed to have been in there for, but it's got to be, I don't know, a couple of weeks. It's going to take that long to get a beard of that growth, I guess. He does try and sort of reason with the kids and so on, to limited success, which kind of leads to, I guess, the more controversial scenes in the movie, which is the animal killing.
Yes, this film also features animal cruelty. Of course, Cannibal Holocaust was infamous for that. In fact, the animal cruelty is one of the reasons why Cannibal Holocaust is still not available in the UK completely uncut. It's available with all the gore intact, so you can get it for that, but all the animal cruelty is cut out of it because we have very strict animal cruelty laws, and rightly so. Mm-hmm. There is animal cruelty in this. It's kind of, you were talking about earlier on, there's sort of like a snake fight, a snake and a Komodo dragon. I think it might be something else. I believe that's stock footage.
Right.
Yes, there's some animal cruelty. It seems to be sort of shuffled into the middle there. There's one very notable scene there, which is the killing of a live alligator, complete with the gutting of it. It's a very graphic, very detailed scene. Deodato alleges that these scenes of cruelty were inserted into the film by producer Giorgio Carlo Rossi. Now, that's according to Wikipedia, so I can't verify that. How do you feel about, first of all, the animal cruelty in this movie? How do you feel about animal cruelty in films in general, particularly, you don't see it very often, but particularly in some of these cannibal movies? What's your take on it?
I'll just come straight out and say it. I don't see the need for it. I can see why they did do it, because you have instantly horrified your audience by doing it. No one goes to a film expecting to see that. Well, maybe they'd heard of it and they went to see that. I don't know, but for me, making a film is it's pretend, it's make-believe. Mm-hmm. And you're using the skill of your director, your actors, your writer, and so on, to try and evoke emotions from your audience, kind of thing. Entertain them, horrify them, disgust them, whatever that may be. And I just kind of think if you need to go to this extreme, then you've failed. This is entertainment. I just don't see the point of it. If you need to do that, then you're kind of just... And fair enough, if what Deodato says is true, he didn't do it, then we can't lay the blame at his feet. but then he'd go on to do Cannibal Holocaust and
Yeah.
ramp it up a notch. So I don't know. I'm not 100% believing him there, but it's not for me to say. I mean, what about you?
Yeah, I would have to agree with you on that latter point. Well, the whole thing really, but I'm not sure I buy that it was the producer who did it, because he shows it extensively in Cannibal Holocaust, which would come a few years later. So I'm not convinced that he was actively against that. As far as my feeling on it, absolutely the same. There are ways to horrify people without having to kill real animals. Kill anybody really, you don't have to kill a real human to horrify somebody, and the same with animals. I think it's unnecessary. I mean, the killing of this live alligator in the movie, it's very detailed, and it supposedly it serves as a plot point, because there's a bird inside the stomach of the alligator. It never really made it completely clear to me exactly how this works, how Robert would figure into this, but Robert presumes that they are keeping him so that he can be eaten by an alligator, and then they can cut the alligator open later and take... Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't particularly understand what the point of that is. I don't understand what that would do for them.
I've heard of weasels eating coffee beans because they only eat the best coffee beans, and then they shit them out the other end, and you've got the best coffee beans. Strange things like that. There are strange delicacies, so maybe the sort of alligator stomach digesting part of his body. I'm really only guessing at this point, because I haven't got a clue either. But until you said it, I didn't really pick up on that, to be honest.
That's horrifying, the coffee beans thing. Are you telling me that I've got weasel shit in my Nescafe Gold? You are a fountain of information, my friend. But yes, I have to agree. It's a strange thing, and I don't like it. I don't like real animal... I mean, I'm an animal lover anyway, but I don't like seeing real animal death. I don't think it contributes anything to the movie. Now, some people may argue that one of the reasons why Cannibal Holocaust is so infamous is because of the animal cruelty in there, because it shocks people that they're really seeing it. For me personally, I know some people won't agree with this because they love that movie just as it is, and also I'm not a fan of censorship. I like things to be seen the way they should be seen. That's why I own a copy of Cannibal Holocaust that has the animal cruelty in it. But I think that movie would be just as effective if you cut that out. I really do think so.
Well, just to go off on that tangent, there is that release from Shameless, because, funnily enough, Cannibal Holocaust is released in the UK now with 7 seconds cut out, which, if you think, 10 years ago, that's a huge deal, because back then it was like minutes cut out, I think.
Yeah.
But you can get it with 7 seconds cut out, but then there is also, in that Shameless release, a version where Deodato actually re-edited it to exclude the animal killings. There is still an impression there of it, but it kind of it takes a lot of the sting out of it. And I'll be honest with you, I'm no prude, and like you, I'm not a fan of censorship, but that's usually the version I'll watch now.
So, I mean, when you say that's the version you'll watch now, you're meaning the re-edit by Deodato?
Yeah. Deodato's new cut, yeah.
So in the 7 seconds that have been cut out, is that... I mean, it's quite a short amount of time. Have they taken the sting out of the animal killings? Is that what those 7 seconds mean?
Sorry, just to clarify, what happened was Shameless Screen Entertainment wanted to release Cannibal Holocaust, and they thought, you know what, we're never going to get this through the BBFC uncut, so let's get Deodato to, if we're going to make it cut, let's have it done artistically. Let's have him come in and do the cut so he can do it as best it can be. That's happening. In the meantime, they meet with the BBFC to talk about it. Before it's submitted, they get advice that actually these days it would only suffer something like 9 seconds of cuts. So right. Then Shameless are like, whoa, hold on a minute. So you're saying we can release this pretty much uncut in the UK? So, and I think when it, don't quote me on these numbers, but it is something like 7 seconds that ended up being cut out. So this release is Deodato's new cut, which is more than 7 seconds cut out, but cut out sympathetically by Deodato, and also this virtually uncut release that only has 7 seconds cut out. So you get those two versions in there. I will tend to go for Deodato's release because most of the animal cruelty is only kind of hinted at.
Okay, that's interesting information. I need to pick up that then at some point. I need to get that because I would like to see Deodato's cut. I own, I think it's a Dutch version of Cannibal Holocaust it's the complete uncut thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I would be interested in seeing that, actually. That's good to know.
So I think next in the film, it's pretty much our final act, isn't it, where Robert escapes and tries to get back to the plane.
We've spent a lot of the movie at this point with Robert. How do you feel about him as a lead character? Because I mentioned when we were talking about the opening act of the movie that I wasn't that fond of him. I didn't, and I have to admit, throughout the movie, I didn't find him to be a particularly sympathetic character. What's your take on him?
I don't think he's, particularly magnetic either. He's not a great presence on screen. If you think of some of the leading men at that time, some of them were great. This guy just seems to be a guy. I don't particularly know who he is. I think when I said sympathetic either, I was I was more talking about in comparison to Cannibal Holocaust, because in this case, he's just a bit blank. He's a business guy, this we know, but I've not really got any reason to particularly like him or particularly dislike him. He's just kind of there.
Yeah, he's quite bland, isn't he? As you said, he escapes the camp. He manages to get away. Basically, he knocks two of the tribesmen out. I think he kills them, actually, because I would imagine if you get a rock to the head, that's pretty much going to put you out for life, isn't it? In your experience, Tom, of killing people with rocks, can you either confirm or deny that?
I can confirm that.
Excellent. So, knocks him out, or kills him, manages to escape from the camp, and he grabs the girl. I think her name is Puna in the movie, but I'm not positive. But he grabs this girl, this native girl, who's been kind to him through some of the movie. In fact, at one point, he desperately wants something to drink and something to eat, and he's sort of sitting there behind the bars of his cage, if you like. It's sort of a bamboo thing. And she comes up to him, and she starts giving him a hand job. And he doesn't want it. I would imagine nobody in that position would want such a thing. So she's kind to him in that way. So when he escapes the camp, he drags her with him, and they run away from the cannibals. They manage to escape, and they start running as far away as they can. So sort of trying to fold that back into how I feel about Robert. There's a part in there, you mentioned it a while ago, when he rapes her. She's running away from him. She doesn't want to be around him. He's quite a selfish guy. At one point she sort of, kneels down to get a drink from this plant that's there, and he grabs it out of her hand. Everything in the movie seems to be for him, which I suppose is one of the problems I have with the character. She tries to escape from him, he catches up to her, and he rapes her. And so immediately, I'm a bit, it sounds strange to say it, but I'm quite anti-rape. So immediately I've taken a dislike to his character there.
The thing is, what I see this whole third act being about is the movie kind of asking us whether we still like this guy, well, if we ever did anyway, because he has to kind of become a savage to survive in this place, and that's what he does. You see this later on when he kills the tribesmen and he pulls his guts out and chews on them and stuff. I don't know whether I'm misremembering, but was there a rape between tribespeople earlier on?
Yeah, there was something like that. Yeah, it wasn't dwelt on for very long, but yeah, there was a sort of scene like that. Yeah.
So I'm wondering whether they're kind of saying to us this is a method of control, of ownership within this tribe, and he has became a savage to survive this savagery, because like you say, the next day she's making him breakfast, so it's almost like he's he's pacified her by raping her. And I'm not saying that's the right thing, obviously, but is this just the way that tribe works? And it is this journey of Robert and how he becomes a savage to survive in this savage land. And maybe that's what the movie is asking us. Can you still really root for this guy when he becomes this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. I also have to say I loved the way that you summed it up. I mean, she basically becomes a happy housewife
Yeah.
after he rapes her. I mean, so in the next scene, she's finding breakfast for him, with fruits and fish, and so perhaps so. I mean, I certainly I take that point on board that maybe that's ultimately what it was about, that he was exerting some control over her, and maybe these women, as part of the tribe, are quite passive.
Yeah.
But I didn't like the character very much. Now I have to ask you, we've talked about the character Rolf before. He's the guy who's smart, who knows things about the jungle, who knows jungle languages and dialects, and we're going to see him a little bit later on. Would Rolf have been a better lead?
I mean, quite possibly. When this transformation into a savage to survive takes place, would it have thrown up more questions for us? Because if we liked the guy more in the first place, then seeing him resort to this, is it going to make us kind of really question what's going on more than it does with Robert, who we don't particularly like anyway, because he's always a bit of a, he's either bland or selfish,
Yeah.
and he just then becomes a savage. So quite possibly.
Yeah, because I feel, for me personally, I think if I'd liked Robert more, I would have felt more sorry for him. There are moments when he gets captured and he's first in the cave and he's looking around and there are all these tribes people there. Like I said before, it was intimidating, and I felt for him because I think you would feel for anybody in that situation. The plight of it, the fact that you must feel that your situation is inescapable. But in any case, they've escaped now. You've got Robert and Puna, I guess her name is. Mimi Lay is the actress who plays her. They run away. They find a cave and they go inside. And Rolf is in the cave. We have presumed that he's probably dead at this point because when they got tossed off the raft. But he's in there and they see him and he's reasonably well. His knee is infected. I think he's got gangrene in there. And Robert at this point, there's a scene there where he's sitting down with Rolf and Robert's talking about this mansion back in, was it New York? Or was it? Yeah, a mansion back in New York, and talking about, riches, and Rolf kind of sees that Robert has gone mad a little bit, which I think many people would in the situation he was in. So you've got the three of them together, and now it's a fight for survival for the three of them. The goal, really, the mission of the movie at this point now is, how do these three people get back to the plane? How do they find their way back there? And I have to say, I mean, I do think the film drags in places. From this point onwards, I was really invested in it. I really thought that this is, a couple of people, I may not like one of them, but this is a group of people fighting for survival.
I agree. And Rolf adds that little bit of... he's holding Robert back a bit because he's got the bad knee and so on. So it adds that bit more suspense. Are they going to catch up with them, kind of thing? And there's some great scenes of the tribes people in the jungle and so on. So yeah, I'm totally invested by this point. But you're right, it has dragged a bit in places.
And so they set off and try to make their way back to the plane. And of course, as you would expect, they were not seen when they left the camp, but you must expect that at this point they've discovered that Robert isn't there anymore. They give chase. They end up finding the three of them. At this point, the three of them know. I think they're a little bit overly optimistic, in fact, Robert and Rolf in particular, about the fact that they're going to get to the plane, because they can see the airstrip from where they are. They're sort of up high on a kind of ridge, I suppose. And they count their chickens, I think, a little bit too early, because they feel, yes, we found it, we're definitely going to survive. And of course, as they're heading towards the airstrip and they're almost there, the cannibals catch up to them, and Puna is killed there, taken back to the cave. And we get this extended scene where the cannibals, they open her up and they cook her and they eat her. Actually, I don't know if they cook her. Do they cook her?
Is that the scene where they put the hot rocks inside or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I got from it. Yeah, they were kind of interesting way of cooking, I suppose. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if it was me, I'd whack her leg on a barbecue, mate. Put a bit of barbecue sauce on there, bit of Paul Newman's, and
Exactly. But these are savages, remember, Chris?
Yeah, they haven't got... Paul Newman might have been hiding in a cave there, Tom. We don't know. You and me, we need to film a sequel to it. Oh, Paul Newman's not alive anymore, is he? God rest his soul.
Damn it.
What about Ainsley Harriott? Can we put him in a cannibal movie? I'd like that. actually.
Definitely.
I'd make a movie like that. But they eat her because presumably they've realised that she betrayed them. It does. It makes you wonder. I don't know if it makes you wonder, Tom. It makes me wonder. If you're prepared to eat your own kind, why don't you just solve the problem then and there and just eat each other?
There was a woman earlier on who had a baby by the river and then threw it in the river. Why didn't she just eat the baby?
It doesn't make sense, does it? That's a very, very brief moment. She tosses the baby into the river there, and
I'm not sure whether it's supposed to tell us something and I'm just missing it, or whether it's just there to shock us. I'm really not sure.
It is. It's trying to tell us, don't throw your baby in the river. That's what it's trying to tell us. So Puna's gone. Robert doesn't particularly seem to care, I've noticed. Robert and Rolf just carry on. At this point, Rolf is looking bad, isn't he? I mean, his knee is infected. He really can't walk very much at all. And they come to this. So it's an open place. There's lots of rocks. There's water there, and the cannibals are there to meet them. And Robert has a duel with a cannibal. And I quite enjoyed this scene. I actually think this sort of says something interesting about the movie, about the cannibals, about Robert, in that he has a duel with one of the tribesmen. He defeats him, kills him, and he proceeds to open him up and he eats some of his body, I guess some of the liver or some of the flesh inside, as a way of demonstrating to the tribespeople, I can be just like you, I can be a savage too. How did you feel about that?
Well, exactly. I think it's the culmination of this arc, this sort of descent into savagery that he's had to go through to survive, and it's the conclusion of that. Look, I've become like you now, and it's they see that and they leave him alone. So yeah, I think it's the kind of the end to his transformation.
At this point, Rolf is looking the worse for wear, I have to say. Robert and Rolf, they carry on going. The cannibals are still following them, which I think is interesting, but they're not doing anything to them. I wonder if at this point they've come to somewhat respect Robert.
Possibly, yeah.
That's the feeling I get. They manage to make it to the plane. Again, Rolf is looking bad. They get into the plane. Of course, as you would expect, the plane won't start. At this point you're thinking, all right, well, this would be some twist. It would be expected, to be honest, but it would be some twist if the plane never started and Robert and Rolf were never able to escape. Well, the plane does start in full view of the cannibals, who are sort of waiting in the bushes there, and the plane starts. Robert and Rolf get away. Off they go, up into the air. They're in their plane, away. They've escaped from the situation, and right at the end there, Rolf, I presume Rolf dies in the back of the plane.
Yeah, I don't really know for sure. I assume that as well.
The final shot of the movie is actually the same as the very first shot of the movie, where it says that this is a true story, which I think Tom and I agree is probably bullshit.
Definitely.
And that's the end of the movie, and I quite enjoyed it. I'm not going to pretend that it's a great movie. I don't think it is. I don't think it's as good as Cannibal Holocaust, which I think holds together really well. I think it was. If you look at how influential Cannibal Holocaust is, even to this day, with the found footage thing. Found footage movies are still pretty big, still pretty popular even now. And it could be argued that Cannibal Holocaust was the very first one. I think Cannibal Holocaust is more unique. I get more satisfaction out of watching it, minus the animal cruelty. Having said that, if I saw this movie, available cheap somewhere on Amazon or whatever, I would probably pick it up and I would probably watch it again. I feel quite satisfied that what we saw was a decent movie by a filmmaker who is good at what he does.
I think we're on the same page. It didn't blow me away, but I like Deodato, and after a while I stopped making the Cannibal Holocaust references in my head because I was invested in this film. Because it is its own thing. It's a different story told in a different way. Mm-hmm. So it was good. But on an academic level, you could say it's also interesting to see that this is kind of where the building blocks of Deodato making Cannibal Holocaust were. This was his first, I'm assuming his first cannibal movie, and obviously it feeds into what comes next. So purely on an academic level, it's worth a watch, and it's interesting in that respect. But yeah, didn't blow me away, but I enjoyed it, I might watch it again, and I don't feel like my time was wasted watching it at all.
No, absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. I think we're on the same page about that one. I've got two more quick things here, Tom, before we move on to the next film we were going to talk about. Can't wait to talk about that one. Now, Tom, there's a lot of penis on show in this movie, which, looking at your notes here, I'm led to believe you were rather fond of. Can you elaborate on that? Elaborate, be yourself, be free.
Well, I'm looking at your notes where you write there are a lot of penises on show. A lot. So
Yep,
I think
that's
it's affected you somehow as well.
Yep, you missed the revision there, Tom. I uploaded some revised notes there that said there are a lot of penises on show. A lot. What I wish the most was that yours was on show. But but you didn't see it. It's fine. It's fine. If you don't want to do the right preparations for a podcast, Tom, that's your business. I still have some respect for you.
I do apologise.
Now, oh, Tom, you put up with a lot, I tell you. Now, one final thing on this. Just like in Cannibal Holocaust, there are several pieces of extremely pleasant music. And in one particular scene, it's rather inappropriate, which is the scene when Puna she's been killed and she's been ripped apart and eaten. What do you think about that? Like, it's interesting, isn't it? Deodato seemed to enjoy playing the sort of, I don't know how to describe the music. It's sort of it's a bit loungy and like an Italian soap opera, and it plays over parts of the movie. It's quite inappropriate, but it was the same thing in Cannibal Holocaust, and it kind of works, doesn't it?
It's something that maybe they honed in Cannibal Holocaust, because that famous theme in Cannibal Holocaust, on the one hand, it's quite pleasant music, but it's also got quite a haunting kind of aspect to it. Whereas this one, when Mimi Leigh's getting cooked, it's sort of like, you know, there's nothing haunting about it. It's just like, what? What are you doing? So, yeah, maybe he just hasn't quite honed that skill yet.
Well, you're right. I mean, the theme to Cannibal Holocaust, the main theme, there is a part in there where it sounds quite ominous, whereas here it isn't really. It's just sort of inappropriately pleasant in places. But I just thought it was interesting that's, you know, I don't know if that's where he began with that, but it did cross over into Cannibal Holocaust later, and I feel it was more definitive there. But it's an interesting stylistic choice that he makes to put this sort of, rather than having a lot of very ominous, evil-sounding horror music in there, it's anything but.
Strange choice, absolutely, for a scene where a woman's getting cooked from the inside out.
So, that was Cannibal, directed by Ruggero Deodato, released in 1977. I think we've given a good overview of it. I think we both are kind of in agreement that we sort of enjoyed the movie. It's decent stuff. Not as good as Cannibal Holocaust, but there's some stuff in there to enjoy. I think if you like Cannibal Holocaust and you've not really delved into Deodato's work that much, I would suggest giving it a go. You know, I mean, if you can get it somewhere for cheap. It is available on various DVD editions under different titles, such as Jungle Holocaust and Last Cannibal World. To be honest with you, I mean, I did a search. I couldn't find a sort of good, affordable DVD release of it that I would say is the definitive one, so I don't know. But if you like the sound of it, see if you can find something on it. See if you can find an affordable DVD. Give it a go. Hopefully it's uncut. And I would say, I think we recommend it, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a recommend.
Of course, as part of this show, part of our format is that we do two movies, a double bill. And I got to talk about the good movie. I got to give you a plot summary. I'm quite happy because now I get to hand you over to my dear friend Tom, who's going to tell you about a little movie called Cannibals, directed by Jess Franco. Tom, take it away. Ha 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 ha.
I have got a treat for you, Chris. Cannibals, made
Is
in
it your
1980.
penis?
Cannibals, made in 1980. Directed by Jess Franco and also written by Jess Franco and John Rowland, uncredited. Not surprising, really. Also known as White Cannibal Queen, The Cannibals, and Mondo Cannibal. Probably, again, there's probably more names out there. There always were with these films at this time. But the film begins with a scientist named Jeremy, played by Al Cliver. Now, we all know Al Cliver from several things at this time. Zombie or Zombie Flesh Eaters is... Zombie 2 or Zombie Flesh Eaters, probably the most famous one, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
his wife Elizabeth and their daughter Lana travelling on a boat as part of an expedition. Several members of a local tribe of cannibals board the ship and proceed to kill off the captain, then pin Elizabeth down and eat her alive. Jeremy is knocked unconscious and taken off the boat, while Lana initially hides and is later seen by members of the tribe unconscious near a rock at the edge of the beach, which surrounds the jungle that the tribe inhabits. They sever Jeremy's arm after capturing him and then take Lana into their camp and declare her the White Goddess, sparing her life. Jeremy manages to escape but faints as he tries to get away. Fortunately, he's found by some men driving near where he has fainted, and they help him return to New York. In New York, Jeremy slowly undergoes physical and mental rehabilitation, assisted by his nurse Anna, played by Lena Remey. He comes to remember that his daughter was kidnapped by the tribe, and he wishes to undertake another expedition in order to rescue her from their clutches. He does this with the aid of the company who sent him on his original journey. Some years pass since the death of his wife and the kidnapping of his daughter, and in that time Lana has grown up with the tribe and is joined in marriage to one of the tribesmen. Jeremy, Anna and a group of other explorers journey back into the jungle on a quest to save Lana, but the odds are stacked against them when the cannibals, hiding in the trees and bushes, lie in wait, bloodthirsty and ready to kill.
Remember, this is going to be no tea party. Remember that.
Oh, we've got a guide, you know. One who knows the Malawi area very well.
I've been there before.
So you know the Gavis tribe, then?
I know they're dangerous.
Well, I'll go to any lengths to find them.
I warn you, it will be risky to take all these people along with us.
I know. They wanted to come.
Well, I'm only concerned about money, and I want to be paid in advance.
You're absolutely sure you want to come along, then?
Oh, I know it'll be a tough trip, Professor, but we'll follow you wherever you go. I was very, very unjust with you.
Barbara's felt very bad about it. She wants to make up. And besides, we're all mad to go on a cannibal hunt. You give the orders and we'll execute them.
Now, listen to this man's voice, people. I mean, I am a straight man. I've got a beautiful girlfriend. But you make me hard, Tom.
Good. So some background on Franco. Jess Franco, commonly known as Jesus Franco, was born in 1930 in Madrid, and he was incredibly prolific as a filmmaker, directing 200 or so movies, shorts and documentaries, and he was known for making a number of erotic movies in addition to many horror and exploitation titles, and he died in 2013 at the age of 82. So, Chris, what do you think of this one?
Yeah, it's rubbish. We need to say, really, isn't it? I mean, for starters, the plot summary that you read out there, I think there's more plot in that plot summary than there was in the actual movie. I don't know where to begin with this, really. I hated it. First of all, the song that plays over the opening credits, and in one or two places near the beginning of the movie, has a gentleman singing what sounds like doo-doo cack. That man right there was wise, possibly the wisest person associated with this production. He summed it up brilliantly. It's cack, utter cack and doo-doo brown. I would rather insert a tree trunk into my urethra than watch this movie again. I'm not talking about any old plain tree trunk, Tom. I know what you're thinking, but one with lots of little knobbly bits on it and rough chunks of bark and some branches and a bird's nest. These are the least authentic looking tribespeople I've ever seen in any movie.
Well, I think when they first turned up and what the first guy looked like the guitarist out of Kiss, the one with the cat face, you kind of start to think, oh, hold on.
I mean, they're all white. They're painted up like the baseball furies from the Warriors. If this was a movie about finding the next member of Kiss, I'd understand, but it isn't. It's about a cannibalistic tribe, and what they do here it's laughable, in my opinion. Bad makeup. And cannibals that basically just run around with large sticks and jump up and down a lot. I mean, the cannibals in Last Cannibal World, the film we just reviewed, the Deodato film, to me they look pretty authentic.
Yeah.
In this movie, I don't know what's going on here. They're white people who have horrible makeup on, and that's about it. And they just basically run around and jump up and down. There's really nothing. I don't find them to be particularly intimidating. There's only one scene in the movie that I thought, it's a very brief moment, but one scene that I thought conveyed a sort of decent sense of fear, and it's when, as Tom described in the plot summary, these cannibals for some reason decide to board a boat, even though the boat is nowhere near land. It's quite strange to me that they would even want to venture out of their jungle, their area where they reside, and board a boat. It doesn't make any sense to me. But anyway, they board the boat, they kill off the captain, they eat Elizabeth, which goes on forever. I'm going to get to that in a minute. And then they go downstairs, and Jeremy and Elizabeth's daughter Lana is down there, and she hides from them. And there's a scene that I think this is probably the only thing I liked in the movie, where they're standing in a doorway and it's dark behind them, and they're looking into the room to see if anybody's in there. I thought that was a mildly effective moment, not authentic tribespeople at all. So what happens is, as Tom described in the plot summary anyway, Jeremy gets taken off the boat, kidnapped. Lana doesn't. It doesn't make much sense to me here, and this is the theme of the movie, really, that most things don't make much sense. But Lana is looking through the window down on the lower deck, and then we flash to another scene, and now she's laying on some rocks. How did that transition happen there? I don't understand how she went from being upright and conscious to being splayed out on rocks unconscious. Do you have any perspective on that?
I have no idea. Like you say, nothing makes any sense. I mean, Jeremy, they take his arm, and then they just leave him there. These are cannibals. Maybe he had his arm, had a little nibble, and he didn't taste very nice, so they just left him there. I don't know. But
could be.
You would think they would take him or kill him or something, but they just take his arm. And then the little girl's lying in the water, and these cannibals, who I assume have never really seen civilization. Well, I guess they might have done, because that guy later on says he speaks to them. But, one of them's sort of stood up there and he's like, white goddess,
Oh, please do that every show.
I'm going to. But you're right. None of it makes any sense.
But you're absolutely right. I mean, it's funny you say they've never seen civilization, but most of them speak English, which is never established why that is, because supposedly they've never seen civilization, but some of them sure can speak English. So we were talking about Lana there. She's a young child. A couple of tribesmen, they find her, they bring her back into the camp, and they declare her the White Goddess. We don't know why she's the White Goddess. It's never established why she's some sort of sacred person. But Jeremy manages to escape, and like we said in the plot summary, he gets taken back to New York. So supposedly it must, because later on in the movie we see that Lana has grown up and she has now been incorporated into the tribe, and she's grown up with them. So it must be about 10 years or so.
It's got to be, because not only must it be about 10 years, it feels like about 10 years on screen, because they go back to New York, and those scenes which go nowhere, absolutely nowhere. He's just wandering around. I can't remember what happened. Then he goes to the woman who was the kind of finance for his mission, and for some reason they don't believe him. And she's like, hello, this is so-and-so. He's actually my lover. And then he explains, my daughter was kidnapped by cannibals, and the guy who has just been introduced as a lover just tells him to get out of here, and it's just like, why don't you believe him? It makes no sense.
And that guy is irritating. I'm going to get to him later, but God, those scenes back in New York, they just drag and drag and drag, and they take up, a good chunk of the early part of the movie. Now I have to say, we flash forward a bit there, but we mentioned back on the boat that Jeremy's wife Elizabeth she has a bunch of these guys, a bunch of these cannibals. They descend upon her, push her to the ground, descend upon her, and they proceed to eat her alive. Now, I would give this as an example. The scene where Captain Rhodes from Day of the Dead is pulled apart by the zombies very quickly is a really effective scene, I think.
Yeah.
In this, So it could have been very effective if you'd had them eating her alive, pulling her apart very quickly. But Jess Fucko Franco, as I call him, Tom, he decided to make these scenes, and there are a couple of these scenes in the movie. He decided to make these scenes where people are being eaten alive incredibly long, boring, slow. There is he decides to do these weird things, like parts of the sequence will be in slow motion, parts of it are blurry, then he'll zoom in. And I swear, the eating of Elizabeth, did it take 10 minutes? It felt like it took 10 minutes to me.
It felt like it. I don't know. It could be that he's trying to mask bad effects, but it felt like a stylistic choice that let's do this slow motion, linger on the horror, but it just made it boring.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I mean, I knew then, even though up to that point, the voice dubbing, the overdubbing was comical. So I knew at that point that we were in for a rough ride. But once we get to that scene, it doesn't hold up well. Now, we mentioned that it's probably been about 10 years. At this point, I don't know why it takes them this long to decide to go back to the jungle to rescue Lana. I don't know how Jeremy knows that she's even alive. But Jeremy's daughter, as a child, she has long brown hair. Somehow she grows up as a sexy blonde vixen. How? Do they have hairdressers in the jungle? It's not much of a jungle, really, because it really isn't a jungle. It's quite an open space with a few trees littered about. It's been a good number of years since his daughter was taken by the tribe, which accounts for her growing up a good amount. Yet she looks completely different. And perversely, he looks exactly the same. He has not aged a day. And the same with Anna, the nurse. At least put some grey streaks in their hair, for God's sake.
A line or two as to why it took 10 years for them to go back, because this is a dad whose daughter's been kidnapped. You would be on the next plane over there, even if you had to go on your own. That's what you would do. But they just don't do it. And then when he gets there, you said about awful dubbing and awful dialogue. I don't come down on bad dubbing that much in these type of films, because it's par for the course sometimes. It's just the way it is. But you do get the ones sometimes where you kind of think, this is actually just really badly translated, or it feels like in the original Italian they said what they were going to say, but by the time they've said that in English there's still space to fill, so they just add more things in, even though it's nonsensical. And when Jeremy goes back to the jungle and he meets up with that guide, who I think you say is played by Jess Franco.
Yeah, the guy who has traded with them in the past, yeah.
I mean, if you look at the dialogue, it's here on IMDb. Jeremy goes over and he says, "May we sit with you?" And Mr. Martin, who's Jess Franco, says, "It's a public place." And Jeremy says, "I'm told that you know the Malawi region very well, better than you know the palm of your own hand." And Mr. Martin says, "No, leave the palms of my hands out of it." So, then they meet up with this guide. They have this bizarre conversation. In any other film, this is where they would put a team of badass kind of, militia fighters to go into the jungle to rescue this girl, but they just seem to be like a bunch of old people on a day trip.
Yeah, they pull in a grey-haired British dude and his lover, and a couple of other people who are coming along for the ride. I have to also say, by the way, just going back to that scene with Jess Franco when he has the very small part in there, whoever did the dubbing for him, it's like some gnarly southern Texan accent. I hesitate to say Texan because my girlfriend is Texan, and she probably would listen to this movie and think, nope.
I'm told that you know the Malawi region very well, better than the palm of your own hand.
No, leave the palms of my hands out of it. It'd be impossible to know that area in depth. Oh, hi.
Who would know it
Only
then?
the Geevis know it well.
That's just who we're looking for.
The Geevis? Well, in that case, you people better look for somebody else around here.
But I was told that you trade with them.
So what about it? Even the Americans deal with the Russians without people making a big thing out of it.
I don't even think he's the worst. I don't think that's the example of the worst dubbing in the movie. I think there's probably more. But you're absolutely right. They get on a boat. Now they got this British guy on there, or certainly somebody who's doing a British accent for this guy, and for some reason this guy annoyed the hell out of me. We're all mad to go on a cannibal hunt. I bet you are, you dipshit. Nobody should be that happy about venturing out into the territory of a cannibalistic tribe. Far too happy, far too enthusiastic, doesn't believe Jeremy. Why are you going then? I don't understand why you're even going if you never believed him in the first place. I was quite happy, to be honest with you, mate, and I'm sorry in advance for the spoiler here, but we spoiled the hell out of both of these movies. They're very, very old movies, so we're not going to hold back.
No.
He gets taken out later in the movie by being shot with a poisonous dart while having a heart attack. So that's a 2-for-1 deal on that. I was quite happy about that. I don't know about you.
Yes, very. But well, his girlfriend, the woman, the benefactor, says this line before she dies. We never really believed you. We just came along for a bit of fun. So that kind of explains why they just looked like they were out on a day trip, I guess. But they weren't the only ones. I think there was like maybe one other guy who looked like he could handle himself. But he gets it. I think Al Cliver, Jeremy, is the only guy who fires any bullets in the whole thing.
Well, there is a part, isn't there, in the movie, like towards the end, where I presume Jess Franco must have been like, look, we've still got a whole bunch of characters here. Why don't we just kill almost all of them off within a 2-minute period? And that's what they do. And so they have the cannibals hiding in the bushes and in the reeds. And behind trees, and they basically fire poisonous darts at almost everybody. They take several people out, except for Jeremy gets away and Anna they both get away, and there's another guy as well, isn't there, with them? So it's the three of them, they get away, and British guy's lover is laying there. She couldn't handle the journey at all, had to be carried for some of the way and helped along. She's laying there having a rest, and oh boy, we get to enjoy another terrific extended scene where the cannibals, they descend upon her just like they did Elizabeth, and they spend forever eating her alive, and it's poisonous to my soul, this movie. I think that's what's happening. I feel that I won't live as long as I would have done if I hadn't watched this movie, because there are scenes in here that's sapping my life energy away from me, and that's one of them. Don't worry though, there's another one coming later on. So everybody is dispatched except for Jeremy and Anna and another guy whose name I can't remember. So at this point, just to sort of fill you in on where the plot is, Jeremy's daughter Lana has, as we said, she's integrated into the tribe. She's married one of the tribesmen there. She looks completely different to how she did as a child, which you would expect, of course, grown-up actress to look very different. But she's got blonde hair now when she was a brunette before. That doesn't make any sense to me at all. So Jeremy and Anna, they end up getting kidnapped by the cannibals. They take them hostage, and the other guy as well. They go in. I still think that this is the least intimidating cannibalistic tribe I've ever seen. I don't. If they took me in, they may eat me alive, but I'll probably be laughing all the way. To be honest with you, I don't think that there's anything to fear here. Anna gets taken away, and we have to endure another scene of her being eaten alive, and it's long. It's long.
Again, I'd only be making excuses for him. By this point, I just wanted to die. It was just the worst. Like you say, the cannibals, it just looked like they've picked up you over there, you, the guy on the catering truck, you come over, you be a cannibal. There's no more thought gone into it than that.
Yeah, I'm telling you, mate, some of those guys, Jess Franco was like, hey, you over there from Benny's Pizza Joint, can you come over here, wash the marinara sauce off your fingers, and put some makeup on your face. So Anna is gone. So there are only two people left in the movie. Sorry, two survivors, and that is Jeremy and this other guy whose name I can't remember, but he's an incidental character at best, really. Anyway, in comes Lana, and she begins to recognise that is her father. I don't know how he manages to recognise that, because she looks completely different.
That's right. I don't think she says anything either, does she?
I think she speaks about 3 lines in the movie.
Right.
Now, it's interesting, actually, because I got an interesting piece of information about that. The young version of Lana is played by an actress named Anushka. The older version, who turns into some blonde vixen for some reason, is played by Sabrina Siani. And Jess Franco apparently referred to her as the stupidest actress he's ever worked with. There's a documentary that's on the Blue Underground DVD release of this film, Cannibals. I don't know that I feel much sympathy for him, considering he only gave her about 3 lines.
Considering how much stupidity is on show everywhere else, she's the least of my worries, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like it if she made a documentary where she called him the stupidest director she's ever worked with. But I think she only appeared in this one movie, so I don't think she thinks that highly of her acting career, which she shouldn't, because she's pretty awful as well. Anyway, eventually he manages to escape with Lana again, and really the last scene of the movie is him battling with her husband. First of all, the incidental guy, the only guy left along with Jeremy, attempts to fight the guy. I don't know about you, but I knew that guy was going to die almost immediately.
Well, he'd been there earlier on while Al Cliver was shooting away. He was just stood there, wasn't he, with his gun?
Yeah.
So completely ineffective anyway.
You say he was stood there, mate, but he was on the phone to his agent saying, look, get me out of this fucking thing. And so he dies. I think he gets stabbed, doesn't he? So he dies, and then it's the final duel between Jeremy and Lana's husband. And basically the concept of this is that if you win the duel, you get to keep the girl. So if Jeremy wins the duel, he gets to keep Lana. At first he's losing the duel, but then he ends up winning it. He almost drowns the guy. Lana doesn't want him to kill the guy because I guess she has some feelings for him, but she also recognises her father. Anyway, the guy says, okay, well, you've won, so take her, off you go, and walks away. And Lana and Jeremy start running towards the trees, possibly away to freedom. And that is the end of the movie. So we've kind of gone through the plot and everything. Let's get right down to the nitty-gritty of it. What did you think about this movie overall?
I'm not a great kind of subtext guy. I'm not one of these guys who nitpicks movies to death, you know. If a movie's kind of fun, if it's kind of giving me a fun ride, a good experience, it's horrific, whatever it is that's sort of hooking me in, I can forgive a lot. But yeah. I just couldn't forgive anything in this movie. It was just the worst.
It's funny, Tom, because it's actually almost exactly the same length as the Deodato movie. Both movies are just shy of 90 minutes long. So you've got 90 minutes to play with there. And yet I feel like, I mean, this movie would always have been bad. It's inept. It's very badly directed, badly written. I know you can't expect great writing. Horrible dubbing. You know, say what you like about the Deodato movie, but I do think the dubbing on there is decent. I don't think, it's not amazing, but it's decent. It's much better than this. Every part of this really is terrible. It's amateur. This was Jess Franco's very first Cannibal movie, and like we said, he makes a cameo in the movie as a greedy trader. I don't like Jess Franco very much as a filmmaker. I think he's a schlockmeister. He made a lot of movies, erotic movies, horror movies, exploitation movies, and always with a view to cashing in on the next great trend. I think this movie is proof that it was a big cash in. He didn't have much money to work with, I imagine. Awful camera work, particularly during the cannibalistic scenes where people are being eaten alive, lots of zooming in, slow-mo and blurriness, just very inept stuff. The worst thing really about it is that it just drags, man. It's boring. It's really, really boring. And I think, a 90-minute movie, and yet I feel like you could have, like I said, it will never be a great movie, but you could have cut so much out of this thing, and at least it still would have been rubbish, but it would have been, the pace could have been a lot better. I honestly, this was the movie that, you're getting excited about doing a podcast for the first time in years. This is the movie that makes you question if you ever want to do it at all, Luckily, I saw the Deodato movie first, and as we established, we like that one. This one was a chore. When I got to about the hour mark, there was half an hour left to go. I thought, I don't know how I'm going to make it through this. I really struggled with this one.
It was terrible. I mean, and you've got Al Cliver there. I like Al Cliver, Yeah. He's been in a few Fulci films, Zombie 2, The Beyond, and so on. He was a fun presence in Zombie 2. I like him. He's a good character. But he he just looked lost in this. You know, he must have known. I get at the end of the day, he's a working actor. He's got to do what puts food on the table, but you know, he just looked confused through this as well.
You're absolutely right. I mean, he does have that look on his face where it's a witless sort of look. It's looking around him thinking, am I really in this? I don't really know what's happening. I just know that I'm in something. And I think there might be a director here. I'm not sure. And I have to side with you there, Al. I'm not sure either. Interesting fact here, Anushka, who plays the young version of Lana, would go on to have a part in 1981's Zombie Lake, which is another wretched film directed by Jean Rollin that we'll be covering at some point in the future. Can't wait to talk about Jean Rollin. He's another fantastic guy. So, Tom, any more thoughts on this movie?
No. What's left to say? I think we've said all there is to say. On paper, guy goes into the jungle, wife torn apart by cannibals, daughter kidnapped. He goes on a mission of vengeance and rescue. You could make something out of that, but there's just none of that here. So, no, it's awful.
It is available on DVD from Blue Underground if you want to buy it, but don't.
Should we hear what Chris has got to say?
Yes, Chris Brown sent us some feedback. Very kind of him. He's a nice guy when he's not stealing people's ideas. So he sent us some feedback. Chris, take it away.
Hi chaps, it's Chris Brown here from the Video Nasties podcast. Just dropping a quick line really, just for two things. One is to say how pleased I am that to hear that yourself, Chris, and Tom are back podcasting again. Really looking forward to the shows and what you're doing. And also to drop some feedback on one of the films that you're covering, Jess Franco's Cannibals. Now, I probably know this film better really as a White Cannibal Queen. Franco made this at the same time as he made one of the Video Nasties, which is why I know it quite well. And that Video Nasty was The Devil Hunter. Franco at the time, it was in the middle of the cannibal boom, as it's called, and he was working with Eurocine to make a number of films, and here he made this film, The Devil Hunter, and also did an uncredited screen rewrite on a different Video Nasty, which was Cannibal Terror. Now, generally, it's not uncommon for Franco to make a couple of films at the same time that are similar genres with similar cast members. He did this as well with Women Behind Bars. But with this, neither of them are great. I mean, The Devil Hunter involves a guy with ping pong ball for eyes, but even by Franco's terms, it's a little bit rough and ready. Franco actually basically said this was one of his least favourite films, and certainly his least favourite cannibal film that he made. And that's not uncommon for directors to disown their cannibal films, though. Deodato did it with Cannibal Holocaust. Lenzi disowned all of his cannibal movies, with the exception of Deep River Savages, which is more like a cowboy movie anyway, really, but set in the jungle. But here you can but Franco wasn't a proud man, I think it's fair to say, and it's understandable really why this is one of his least favourite of his films. It is very rough and ready, and that's marked in the fact that the copy that I've got is extremely rough, and it's classic exploitation fare really, though. It looks cheap, it goes under very many different names, and it fulfills its quota of the things that you would want a shocker to contain. Anyway, thanks very much, and I will hopefully, look forward to listening to this podcast, and hope to speak to you soon. Take care, and thanks again. Bye.
Cool, blimey, Chris. If you haven't got anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. My goodness. Chris Brown there, talking about Cannibals and giving us some nice feedback. Thank you very much, my friend. I know Tom and I appreciate that. How do you feel about what he had to say about the movie, Tom?
Well, he's a good facts guy. He's given us some good facts there. He was a little less vicious about it, but he was kind of interesting that Jess Franco didn't think much of it either. But I don't know. I'm not a huge Franco guy. I don't know his work that well, so I'm not sure what a good Franco movie is.
I would raise a point to you, my friend, that I would imagine that Jess Franco not only doesn't think very much of the movie, I would imagine that he doesn't think very much at all, whether it's about eating, sleeping, reading, writing, or directing. But thank you very much, Chris Brown there. Right, so if you would like to leave some feedback for the show, we'd love to hear from you. We really would. Don't forget all the complaints and everything. Just put Tom's name in the subject. Anything that's nice, pop me on there. You know I appreciate it. You're very welcome to email the show. You can also record an audio file if you like, just an MP3. And send it to us. The thing that I would ask, and perhaps you agree with me, Tom, is if you're going to send an email, keep it relatively short. We don't want to read a massive, great page of stuff, just because it takes some time up. And if you are going to send an audio file, try to keep it sort of under 3 minutes. Like, Chris was just over 2 minutes, I think. Just try and keep it fairly short. We would like to hear from people, wouldn't we, Tom?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, for podcasters, we don't make any money out of it. And I think that kind of back and forth between the listeners is what it's all about, really. So, yeah, if we can get that going, that'd be great. Yeah,
so we'll give the information for the feedback in a moment. I just have to ask you, that's it. We've finished reviewing 2 movies that are part of the same genre, but really very, very different in terms of the quality there. How do you feel about our very first episode and our venture into the cannibal subgenre?
I think it's probably quite indicative of what we've got in store for us, where there's going to be some gems and a lot of crap. So I think going forwards, this is what we're in for. But no, it was fun, and I hope things look up next week. But I think with what we've got planned, they will.
Absolutely. In fact, you reckon Chris Brown, because he's a facts man, isn't he? Do you reckon he was sitting there listening to this episode saying, no, you got that wrong. No, that fact was wrong. Chris, I love you, man, but shut up. Do you have anything to say about that, Tom? I'm only giving you a hard time, Chris, because you gave me a free copy of your book. I don't really know. It doesn't really make sense, does it? But that's the way I roll. I have to say, I've had more fun talking about. I had more fun talking about White Cannibal Queen or whatever it is than I did watching it. So listen, feedback. We would love to hear from you. You can contact us at feedback@strangeanddeadly.com. That's feedback@strangeanddeadly.com. You can write us an email there. You can send us an audio file. Keep it fairly short. If you can, and obviously keep the file size down just so that we can actually receive it. You can contact us in other ways via Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at twitter.com/thegoreboy. And Tom, where can they find you?
Same, Twitter/Grindhouse Tom.
You will notice when you go on there, you can browse either site, that Tom has over 3,000 Twitter followers and I have 41. So if you would like to, help a brother out, send some follows my way. I appreciate that. Always follow back, unless you're following me in order to spam a load of nonsense, in which case it ain't gonna happen. But otherwise, I will follow you back. I will reply to you. We're both friendly guys, I like to think. I am anyway. And we would absolutely love to hear. Please send us a follow. Let us know what you thought of the show. That's really the important thing. Tom, do we want to tell them about what we've got planned for the next episode? So we can do that, so that if you guys want to write in and tell us what you think of the movies, we can read that out on the next show.
Absolutely. Well, we got another double bill, this time linked by director, and the director is David Cronenberg, and the movies are going to be Rabid and Scanners.
Oh, I can't wait. We finally get to see some good movies. So, the Deodato movie was good. So, I think, Tom, we're coming to the end of our initial journey, our inaugural episode of the Strange and Deadly show. Before we go, you heard at the beginning of the show, lovely piece of music there, along with the sound of Tom watching one of his pornos. That's why it sounded all fuzzy and everything, white noise. He's been watching them a lot, folks. The music was given to us by another lovely chap named Danny Davis.
We thought it was a good fit. It's good music, and he did a great job, and I really appreciate him for that. So, but yeah, the thing is, we're not giving out a website address yet, because it's not quite finished. But next time around, we should. We're planning on doing these every 2 weeks. So, you know, next time around it should be in a bit better shape. But yeah, Danny Davis, man, one of the nicest guys I've met while I've been doing all of this kind of thing, and I really thank him for that music.
Yeah, super nice guy, and also a very, very talented comedian. Not doing any podcasting at the moment, but he did a podcast many years ago called, I don't know, I'm Great or something. I can't remember what it was called, but
A Disappointment.
A Disappointment. There you go. See, that's the complete opposite of I'm Great, isn't it? Got that wrong.
Just one more thank you as well before we go. A guy who has helped me out a lot over the years. He's helped me out with podcast art and so on, and he's done another great job designing our logo this time. Good friend of the show, the artist Dark Ink One. So thanks, man. Appreciate it.
So yes, we thank Dark Ink. Okay, folks, that's it from us, from myself, Chris, also known as the Goreboy in a prior life, and from
Grindhouse Tom.
It's Tom Elliot. He's a sexy, deep-voiced god, and he's going to be here with me on the next episode of The Strange and Deadly Show. Please write to us. Please talk to us. Until then, we hope you enjoyed the debut episode of our stupid podcast. Goodbye for now.
Bye.